Well, hello all, Game Methuselah. I hope everyone's doing well. I haven't done a video in a couple weeks, so it suddenly occurred to me that if I let more than, a few weeks pass, my wife starts getting flowers and condolence letters. So nobody wants that. So I thought I'd better come out and do some kind of a video before it gets too late and people worry about me. The reason I sort of haven't done a video is that I have a couple little things to talk about, which I'm going to now try to fuse into a video and hopefully make it sort of interesting, but nothing that I thought was really, really worth a video. Sometimes, like I say, I don't like to hear myself talk, but I get out here and I start rambling away. And the other thing is I have been really busy, which really busy means I have been, gaming and painting, organizing my miniatures, working on my house a little bit, gaming some more, kind of watching some movies and TV and not doing anything else. I mean, I have been way too lazy and not getting my stuff done. I owe you guys Mambos. I really wish to be doing more painting, though I'm getting a lot of that done. But I'm just finding myself right now just sort of vacillating. It's also been hotter than the hinges of hell here. Now, up until a few moments ago, I didn't have a shirt on, so I flipped one on here to not scare you. I guess you're going to have to imagine whether I have pants on, but I wouldn't go there if I were you. But I thought if nothing else, I would talk about just a few things I've been thinking about. And they are, one, my last video on initiative, I found exactly what I sort of expected I was going to find. I found a lot of people who were very insightful and had a lot of ideas for initiative. Now, I expected that, but once I started seeing the variety of different styles of initiative people were using, and people were pointing me to brand new games which I had not heard of, or if I had heard of it's only in passing and really had not got involved with them, I started looking into those and found, there's lots more exciting stuff out there than even I've had a chance to scrape through. Now, a lot of that happens because games would come out at times when I was deeply involved in some other game system we were playing, and all of them that I'm involved with. So I would look at them and go, I don't see anything unique or something I wanted to do. So I would just ignore them and start continuing to do what I do. I think that's what most people do with the current D&D. I mean, they stay with D&D 5th, or they stay with Pathfinder, or if in my case, they stay with 4th edition because they enjoy the game system and it works well for them and it makes people in their group happy. Now, that was kind of the other second surprise I got. I know a lot of people love to challenge me on 4th edition, but I was still surprised how many people were stunned and amazed that I prefer 4th edition and that I enjoy playing 4th edition. And what am I drinking, or how crazy am I that I don't see that 5th edition is better or some other game system is better. And it's not a matter of better. I think you guys know by now, I think that role-playing works perfect however you are happy with running it. And that means whatever rule system you enjoy. So if you enjoy 5th or Pathfinder, stick with it, play it. If you're playing something else, stay with that. It's all a matter of what the group likes. I came up with an analogy for 4th edition. I said 5th edition to me is like a big Cadillac. It's comfortable, it's safe, it goes fast, and it's interesting, and it's kind of pretty, and you know about it. 4th edition's a Ferrari. You kind of got to tune it every now and again because, it's still not the newest kid on the block, but it's got some really great things going. It's super, super fast and exciting. And, exciting is the word there. I enjoy it because of its complexity and the levels of combat detail that it gives me over the other systems of D&D that I have played. I like the fact that the players have to become much more involved with their characters than the DM does. DMing 4th is substantially easier than DMing any of the other D&D systems that I'd seen before, other than the early ones for me, where I just made everything up because, when they give you a pamphlet to run the game, it's pretty much up to you to figure out how the rules are going to go. But 4th edition just really stuck to it. The characters are unique. They're very, very powerful. The monsters are very, very powerful with lots of unique powers. There's lots of them. You can mix them in. They have the essentials and the originals, so you can have different styles of generating your characters. I found there was a lot going for 4th edition, but don't have to buy it by my account. Don't even bother. I mean, I might love it, but believe me, I have many of my friends who will not play it. Period. So it tells you everything you need to know about games. rules are just the framework of that fill out the story of your role-playing campaign. Whichever one you use and whichever one you're happy with, stick with it, because it really, really works. The other thing I heard a lot about recently, and I started watching some videos on this, was the renaissance of old gaming. Now, being an old gamer, hey, I thought that was pretty cool. But I've always known there was a renaissance of old gaming because, like anything, when it starts to become older, usually the stuff that came from the very beginning, there are very small quantities of it. There were a lot less people playing originally. The companies would not risk their whole business by making huge runs of miniatures. So things sort of came out in dripples and drabs. And often in the early and mid 70s, it was very, very difficult to even find a character miniature that you could play. There was just so few, and so few hobby shops were carrying them in any bulk. Now that quickly changed, but the real Renaissance old school stuff, which would be the minifig, the Decreespieler custom cast miniatures, some of the archive figures, the Greenwood and Ball Knights, some of the John McEwen figures and things like that, some of the Jack Scrooby stuff even. I mean, there was a very limited amount of figures available in the early days. So it's going to be very difficult for you to find it now. And since this Renaissance, as far as I can see, started decades ago, I think you should start to sit down and decide what it is you want to do. Now, if your bank account is unlimited and you really have a great love to own the stuff from the original, there's still old stuff out there. I mean, there's stuff I see every day on eBay. Now, I'm not willing to pay the prices they're asking for it because I may have 20 of them already, but it's still something that you can find and get at a reasonably gettable price. Some things, like I said, the game world changed. Now, my recommendation was to do the 40-year rule. When I started this like 5 years ago, when we were doing, post the Gary Gygax thing, and I said, look, I'm going to start running the 40-year past campaign so that from the day it is today, we'll be playing the game that was 40 years ago. And as it moves forward, I will go from the 3 books and then the expansion books into OD&D, and then move on from there and eventually go to 2nd edition if we keep playing it all. And the idea is to constantly showcase the games. We ran for a few months. There was some interest in it, but really not. What it really boils down to the Renaissance is not so much as a study of history. The game systems that came before, you see every day. You play 5th edition. They're there. They've just been taken and fine-tuned and added to or subtracted from or modified or changed to make it fit into a more modern game, which everybody can play and enjoy. And that's really what 5th edition is. Now, 5th edition, I think, is the natural extension from 3.5, not 4th edition. I tell people, if you want to play 2 games of D&D, you can play your modern D&D 5. And if you want to play another version of D&D, play 4th. It's a different game. It has a very different dynamic, and in some cases, there are some DMs like myself, a few others out there you might know, who really, really, really like 4th edition and liked it substantially better than what came before. And now that it's out, kind of what's come since. But where most of the people are playing is where you want to be concentrating your effort. But as far as Renaissance of miniatures go, think of it this way. Always go with that 40-year mark, which basically means look at 1980. What's really something that I think is important to do is grab up the 76 to 78 to 80 Ral Partha figures. Ral Partha had a pretty nice run. They ran for a long time. They were there at the real pinnacle of the original D&D. So they were producing in fairly large numbers once they got going. And they were available at a lot more places. By this point in time, most of the Decreespieler figures were long gone. I mean, you could find the custom cast figures occasionally, but normally they were already in somebody's collection. They, Heritage bought them. They kept the line going, but they were not enthusiastic. Surely not like the beauty that was brought out in the Ral Partha figures and their teenage sculptor. They were really very iconic. They made some beautiful figures. Their elves are great. Their dwarves are great. Most of the stuff they made, the orcs and goblins, Everything they made with the characters had feeling. The only thing to remember is up until 1980, the real scale of role-playing games was 25 millimeter, not the 28 or 30s you're sort of starting to see now, these big chunky miniatures. That came in later with like Games Workshop. Games Workshop was originally doing like the Ral Partha imports, and they were doing own sales of products in England. And I had a lot, and still do have a lot, of the pre-Slaughter-base, like the 1980s GW figures. I have a lot of dwarves, I have a lot of undeads in the pre-Slaughter-base. I have some ghouls in the pre-Slaughter-base, which are very cool, and a few things like that. Now, I have Chaos Warriors and a lot of the sets they made, and they were very neat. Now, what was great about them is, what Steve liked is, because they were becoming bigger now, into that 28 scale, the figures were easier to paint. They weren't as detailed in their lavish presentations as a lot of the GW figures are now. They were very, very simplified. And thusly, you could paint them very well and make them look really cool very quickly. And of course, as you guys know, the quicker I can get figures painted and on the board, usually the happier I am, because that means I can have a larger collection of bad guys or something unique and different that the players haven't seen before. And that's what I always want. GW figures were nice. They also were a little bit more expensive. And the nice thing about that, and I know this is going to seem like sort of an oxymoron, is it drove the prices of miniatures up substantially. That may seem like that isn't great, because you go from paying 50, 75 cents a miniature up to $1, $1.25 to, the prices moved on from there, up to what you're now paying. But things you need to remember: higher prices mean better quality. It means you'll get better sculptors, more people will be involved in the quality of the miniatures, you'll get better materials, you'll have more people producing them, and that will be a benefit to you in the long run. You're really never going to break the bank with miniatures. I mean, unless you're a nut like me and you've collected thousands and thousands and thousands of figures and painted most of them, you're going to have a collection that's fairly small. One nice little toolbox with your magnets on the bottom, and you can have a few hundred miniatures, which is likely what most people were going to need for their games. And then you just add a few monsters or characters as you need to for new players, or, well, new monsters. Also the pre-painted stuff out there now, some of it is really nice. And, you start paying more per figure for them, but in some cases you have to do virtually nothing to them. I mean, most of the time for me, when I'm cleaning up pre-painted miniatures, I magnetize them. I do a little dry brush, clean up, make sure there was no details missing. And if I have to add a little detail, I'll add that. Then give them a quick wash, flock the base, and boom, we're done. Very, very fast. I seldom spend more than maybe 10 minutes on a pre-painted miniature just to get it good enough to be on the board and playing. And if there are things that are unique, like chokers or things that you're never going to see outside of a D&D universe, those are great to get out of those sets, because you find them when you can't find others. And since so many people are using them, you can always go onto eBay and say, I want Azers. How much are they? Oh, 3 for $5. I want that, I want that, I want that. Oh, I got 20 Azers now. That's kind of the easy way to build a force, because, other people are going to sell them for you at a reasonable price. And if you buy a bunch from them, you just get them to give you a really good price on the shipping. And now you're paying, really less for figures that are maybe more difficult to find, because you can't be opening a million box hoping to find, 10 of the same, even if they're common. But go for the 80s. Go for the 80s coming backwards. So you've basically got a good 75 to 80. So you've got 5-6 years. You can crom on a little bit more after that. But think of the AD&D world. Think of it as original Dungeons and Dragons or advanced Dungeons and Dragons that they were all playing at that point in time. And it was a real exciting period in role-playing. And most people who are slightly younger than me, maybe a decade or so, that's what they will hearken back to. That will be their old school gaming. And that is where you should look at to build your collections as well, if you want to build a collection of old stuff. And as you get older, well, what's going to end up happening is the people who have the old collections, they may eventually become room temperature, and a lot of their collections will eventually get back out in the public again. And that's how, unfortunately, things happen. Or museums will eventually get formed, which is what I'd love to do, and people will start being able to put all this stuff on display so people can come and see it. And then they don't have to have that collection. They can come look at well, our collections that we made and see how the games were played back in the day. And really telling you it's not that much different than the way it's played today. The only real difference is people like myself who had large collections of miniatures, our collections were in the hundreds, not thousands. And often what Dawn and I would do is before a weekend of gaming, we'd all get together on Friday night. Maybe we'd go see Star Wars for the 47th time. And then we would come home and everyone would crash out except for Dawn and I. When we'd paint for a while and talk about painting and paint and talk. And then we'd crash out. And then we'd end up getting back up early in the morning and paint and talk and eat breakfast. That's what the hobby is. And that's what it was before. And I'm going to bet for many people that's what it is now. It's much bigger. There are celebrities in the hobby. There really were never any celebrities back in the day. But it's a new way for people to appreciate the hobby. And I find that great. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about was I'm about to start second chairing my D&D 4th edition campaign we're playing in Forgotten Realms. Now, Steve Keys was the one who started it. He's been playing 4th edition for quite a while. He's gotten people up to 18th, 19th level, levels that I did not achieve in when I was playing 4th edition. So it really excited me that he had people who were willing to play up to that level and wanting to play up to that level. So he banged out 4 levels of advancement for our characters. And, I can sort of see he's getting a little, I'm getting a little tired here. And I said, great. Now, we could fall back and run my Albion, the fantasy trip game, or I can continue this party on and we'll move on in the same campaign light in 4th edition because I'm perfectly capable of DMing 4th edition. And he's like, hey, that's kind of fun. So we asked everybody and everyone's like, well, we love Albion. And I'm like, but I could tell it's that continuity when you get into a campaign where everybody wants to keep moving their characters forward and they want to become immersed in the storyline and the adventures. And since I know Forgotten Realms, really, really well, it's not hard for me to work it in. So I looked at where, Steve had his place. I found a little area off and I picked it. And then I went on the internet. Now, this is something that did not exist in the 70s or 80s, or mostly even in the 90s. Suddenly, I could click in the area and click in these little towns that I was going to use in this, mirror of the Walking Dead or the mirror of Dead Men or whatever it was. And there's a ton of fan work there. I mean, people have already set it up. Plus, in 5th edition or 3rd edition, there was some mention of it, and all those mentions are there. So you know what bad guys are there at what era, and what the city looks like, and what's there, and what's the motivation for these guys. Oh my gosh, there's a big dragon. That's all there for you. Now, I don't run modules, so I really don't care, but it's like a real help to me to look in it and understand what the cosmology of I think I used the right word. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I should look it up later. Of what is in the area. What creatures, what monsters, what characters, what players. There's a fortification that was given to the dwarves, and they now use it as a trading facility with Waterdeep, and it's like all interesting, and it's nearby, but I would have never thought of that on my own, but once it's there now, well, I'm surely going to run with that. And all the other stuff that's in the swamp, was just what I expected there to be. So I already have all my lizardmen and bullywugs and, will-o'-wisps and undeads by the droves and a few other surprises in there for the characters that are going to be interesting, but draw towards a campaign bad guy that will be good and interesting, but not interfering with the other DM. In a situation when you are becoming the second chair DM, especially if you're someone like me, you don't want to try to overpower the game. It's a possibility and a hardship that I usually need to overcome. Something I was talking to Steve about in last game. I said, look, we need to decide who's going to be the party leader in your group, in our gaming group. We need to talk to the people and find someone to step up because it can't be me. A lot of times I found that when it was coming to the round, people were kind of looking for guidance. And especially since we have a group of very experienced down to not experienced. Now, the very experienced guys, boom, they know what their character does. They've got it all tricked out because, well, they want to show you how cool they are in their 4th edition. I did the same thing. And come up with characters that are very unique and interesting and powerful. But a lot of the newer people are trying to not mess up, not make a mistake, or not do something wrong. But the doing the things is obviously what you go in. And just said, we got to pick somebody, make them the leader, and then have them run the initiative system I had talked about last time. I'm trying to get it in there. Steve's a little nervous about my concept of rolling initiative at the end of each combat, so that it might be you go, bad guys go, oops, bad guys go again, and then you go. I think they're worried that there could be potential for party trash and that type of thing. Well, that could happen. But, of course, we would work very hard to not make it happen, but you never know. But it's something to do when you are going to be in a group and you are going to run a game. The biggest problem for most games is DM burnout, no matter what it is. I cannot imagine, Matt Mercer, how much fortitude it took for him to put game after game after game after game out. Now, maybe he had some ghostwriters and people that were helping prop games, and I understand it's more of a show than an actual role-playing game, so there may have been some other factors, but it still took a lot of work. And it's not always that easy for one person to just keep running a campaign. Even me. I mean, I can do it for a very long period of time. And that's usually because I prep up a lot in advance. Like I told you, for the Minimalist DM, the whole secret is look like you're just sitting there pulling it out of thin air and running it and not even doing anything. Because, hey, I'm a pro. When really you've planned and prepped and made dungeons and you've come up with encounters and random treasures. You've got this all filed away in your little 3x5 box so that you can just say, oh, boom, you killed this monster, you did this, bang, bang, whoop, here's your treasure. And they're like, wow, you just sort of pulled this right out of the thin air. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm really capable of doing that, and I've done it. And I've done it more than a few times. But really, the real secret is good preparation. And not good preparation in reading the modules and understanding all that. It's understanding your area. Understanding what's there. Why I went through all the information that was there. Because when I ran in Matt Coville's game, and I thought I was doing a good job running his world, I don't think Matt did. I think Matt was very uncomfortable with me stomping around in his world. And making changes or decisions that maybe he didn't think were what he would have been making for the game. And since he was writing books and doing all that, you can understand there was a much more proprietary type ownership, and this is my world and I want to be responsible for it. Well, not you. But the nice thing about it is I could be prepped up with all the things that I was doing, that when they go off the rails, and they're going to go off the rails, I was able to easily run a game. And you've already heard about the treasure golem and the like. I was easily able to do that. And that's just experience and being prepared. And being prepared and understanding where your area is. When they want to go to the city and then they want to go to the gnome lair, well, I can pretty much figure out what that's going to look like because, well, I've run a few things like that before. And you will too. The more you do, the easier it gets. But remember, the whole idea of having multiple DMs, in this case, and like any case, is you give that chance for that DM to have a break. And Steve was so excited because I said, well, okay, generate up a 4th level character. He's like, oh, what? I said, well, that's the level of most of the characters. You shouldn't be penalized for DMing. Generate up a 4th level character and you play until we switch back. And when we switch back, I'll just brevet my guy up to whatever level that, the party is at that point. And that's something we didn't do for a long period of time. But I never understood why you would want to penalize the DM. Steve was just saying, I'm not really necessarily that good of a gamer because I usually don't get a chance to game. I'm usually always the one who's the DM. So I'm kind of excited to let him get out there and play and really do a lot of stuff and enjoy the game because, it's easy in my case to sort of sit back and run lighter weight, run things that will be interesting, and challenging and still very, very difficult. But I don't tend to roll as high a level of creatures. I will keep the creatures most likely closer to the lowest level of the party. And I think our party is right now from 2 to 4. And I think there's only one guy who's at 2nd because he came in very late. But I think he'll catch up quickly because obviously if he doesn't get eaten, he'll get obviously more experience, or the experience he'll get from the campaign will obviously push his character faster up into the level. So I expect that everyone will be within 1 level by at least the 1st or 2nd adventure for sure. But more importantly, I need to stay close to what he is doing, not try to have something that's going to overshadow or steal the thunder away from whatever storyline he's working on. Because you don't want to be someone who comes around, like I must have done in Matt's game, and trunch around and step on their flowers and do all the things that are not going to be beneficial to them. What you want to do is give them little lead-ins and little ideas and things to work with that they can say, hey, this is real close. Could those creatures be over in my area? Of course they can. You don't have to live with the module. Start branching out, which I think he's excited to do. He's been doing some reskinning already, but I think he really wants to start running his own content. And I think once he has a chance to sort of kind of sit with me and watch me how I just produce content, that he'll get it and it'll be very easy for him because he's a very good and competent DM. So I'm expecting that his game level will really start to set up, and he'll even make more deadly adventures, which makes it less likely that we'll survive, but surely a lot more fun. And that's what you kind of want to do. Add to the other person's game, add to the grandness of the campaign. If you're running in something like Forgotten Realms, you're not making a huge difference. I mean, you've got cities the size of Waterdeep and all the rest of these places, and dungeons, like the Underdark, and oh my God, we don't even have to go into the great underworld where the Drow are. I mean, there's so many places to go that you're not going to make a dent in anything in that world. So you're really not going to hurt it. So just throw as much as you want into it, but always remember what the other DM is doing. Don't step on his toes. And I think that's really easy to do once you get a little experience, but sometimes it's very hard to do because you want to feel like my part of the game is relevant, and it is. It's going to be relevant. It's going to be relevant just by having fun adventures and some interesting deals and a little town, and maybe ends up with rivalries. There could be all kinds of cool things. Add elements into your game that are not being seen in the other DM's game. That will help too. So if he's running the magic items much more loose, or he's doing whatever, you can add something in a magic shop where you can come and trade your magical items, and for a very small amount get something maybe different or better. This allows a dynamic to sort of pop up to let people fix holes in their characters and or places they feel they are not as significant as maybe the other players are in the game. And that's what people want. People want to feel like that they're part of the game. And you want to make sure, as a experienced player or as an experienced DM, you don't stifle either of that. You work hard to not be the person who minimizes the experience for someone else. So anyway, I hope this was of some interest to you. There's lots more to talk about in the future here. And if you have any questions or anything, please ask it out and let me know what else is going out there. I was real pleased to hear about all the new games that I had not heard of. So I'm looking into stuff now, and I still love new game systems, and it drives me crazy because I really don't think I'm going to switch over to half the ones I have, but I love reading through them and thinking, well, that would be fun, and I want to kind of do this, and I don't have the time. So don't know what I'll get to, but I sure enjoy getting on the path and enjoying all the things I'm finding. So until I have a chance to speak with you again, and I'll try to make it a little shorter, and I'll try to get you a mambo, but I still got to get my dungeon tiles out and clean everything up so I can produce a pretty mambo for everybody. Anyway, fight to me, devils, fight, for I hate peace, and keep as cool as you can. Try to be safe out there and stay away from the craziness, and we'll talk again soon. Game on.